Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I, Ken, read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. For today's letter, we're reading about Lucy's experience with Jess. And before we dive straight into this, I'm just going to reintroduce my team and Megan, who is going to help me unpack this experience. Megan, would you like to remind everyone who you are and what you do?
Yes. So hello, everybody. My name is Megan Brito. As Ken said a few minutes ago, I am a team member with Ken in Ken Read Counseling, and I work with Ken as a coach, helping individuals to process their experiences off the back of a sudden breakup with somebody that had a really insecure attachment style. I help individuals to work on healing their own respective insecure attachment styles. And I can also help provide some context and understanding to a relationship if their ex-partner struggled with an addiction of some kind, including things like gambling addictions, gaming addictions, or sex and pornography addictions that may have affected the relationship. So that's the work that I do with Ken. And I do that part-time and full-time. I work as a registered social worker with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers, and I provide addiction counseling to individuals in my rural Southwestern Ontario community. I specialize in behavior addictions, and I do some substance use as well. So I support folks in their own addiction recovery journey. And for many years, I worked frontline in the field of domestic violence. So I also recognize and can see how sometimes the behaviors of folks that we can see are really, really avoidant or really, really anxious can be abusive, and also helping folks understand that and work on their own healing and moving forward. So yeah, that's me. That's what I do.
And as always, I find that the insights you provide with the neuroscience really insightful in a lot of these cases because it helps to understand the psychology of what's going on for a lot of the people involved. So let's get straight into it. Lucy writes, in August of 2023, I met Jess at work in healthcare. Both of us are 33-year-old women. Jess wasn't out at the time, presumably, in terms of her sexuality, and we went from co-workers to friends. We bonded as I had only come out 3 years earlier. We were dating exclusively by December 2023. There was chemistry, but more importantly, great emotional connection. I felt I'd known her forever. We told each other we wanted a serious relationship. We both revealed prior hurts from avoidant attachers. Oh, okay. Jess had never dated anyone longer than 3 months due to chronic mental health challenges and serious dating, therefore not being a priority. Jess's vulnerability and clear interest in me, as well as consistent communication, was a breath of fresh air. Now, she lives 10 minutes drive from me, and we caught up 1 to 2 times a week. Our friends gushed about how happy we seemed. Just said that she had never felt so emotionally connected with someone during intimacy and didn't think it possible. Jess opened up about her significant mental health history and current struggles. I won't go into exact details, even though she'll very unlikely ever hear about this. I wasn't scared off as we work in the same field. Jess said men she had dated had pushed her away when she discussed mental health in the past. She would shed tears, telling me how lucky she felt. I felt similarly, as I also have insecurities around feeling accepted. Fair enough. Now, at the end of February 2024, Jess became withdrawn and more dysregulated. She went away for the week to attend her sister's wedding. Importantly, Jess had ceased her antidepressants cold turkey due to them, quote unquote, not working 4 weeks earlier. On her return, I was concerned about our approaching first weekend away together. I asked if she would prefer to cancel due to her mood. Immediately, Jess started crying, saying, "We need to break up." She said, "Liking you is not enough. Relationships end sometimes, and she can't be around anyone." She left abruptly in a flood of tears, insisting she didn't need my support. All right, let's pause here. Um, well, so much for just loving Lucy for her emotional connection. It seems like Jess very was hiding some of her own avoidancy as well too. Megan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, there's lots going on. I think I also want to like preface this as someone, right? I am a coach with Ken. Work full time, I work in mental health and addictions. I think a lot of people may have this impression that folks that work in mental health and addictions don't struggle or don't have any challenges in their life, or we are like superheroes or very stoic, and that is far from the truth. And I think that this is a great example to show that folks who help others in their own struggles can have, again, their own mental health challenges as well. Um, so I really see this, and I'm not going to comment if this gets, if this is affecting her work in any way. Like, that's we're not sure about that, and I know that's not like relevant, like that's not outlined here, but I do hear some significant mental health concerns. And then her sharing that Jess had ceased her antidepressants cold turkey due to them not working 4 weeks earlier. Folks that take prescribed mental health medication, whether it's for anxiety, depression, OCD, the thing that is highly encouraged, unless otherwise told by your doctor. Also have to preface this: I am not a medical professional, so this is not medical advice. Please consult your respective healthcare provider. If you have questions about this, but they don't encourage folks to stop using their mental health medication that's prescribed. That withdrawal or the brain chemistry that will change from when you use and then when you suddenly stop is not going to be good or helpful. And when you restart, that medication may not work as effectively, or it may work differently than before. So that's concerning to me, that this is also playing into Jess's mental health. But even reading it, also, I personally am hearing some relationship OCD concerns coming up. I say that the last little part you read, Jess said, liking you is not enough. Relationships end some time. She can't be around anybody. And oh, actually, sorry, it was earlier in the letter. Jess had never dated anybody longer than 3 months. And I know she says due to chronic mental health challenges and serious dating, therefore not being a priority. Perhaps those two things are, still present, but usually if dating is really, really short like that, I kind of wonder. Like, she may not be sharing the full intentions or what's going on, why she's really only dating people 3 months, but that's a red flag for me. And also, it says, I felt like I knew her forever. I think there's a sign of there's some avoidancy coming up. I know when I have dated women that have a pretty significant avoidant attachment style, now what I look for as a red flag is if I feel like they have like fallen from the sky and they are just perfect for me, and we align in so many ways, that is a red flag for me that no, there's probably some attachment stuff coming up. They're probably very avoidant and they're trying to people please so that or they will be liked, that they can people please their way into being accepted. So that's also something that I noticed I can relate to. If you feel like you felt somebody forever, oftentimes that's a red flag of there's people pleasing going on from the other person, and kind of keep an eye out for some words or behaviors that could change. So yeah, I could say a lot more, but I won't because I want to hear what your thoughts are, Ken. Tell me what you think.
I really love everything you said so much because you nailed the points about how there's some ROCD and Jess about liking you is not enough. To add to what you said in that particular point, something about that really speaks to me is she's obviously not satisfied by herself, meaning that she, even in this relationship, which she says initially, I'm so lucky to have you because I feel like I've got this amazing connection with you. Clearly, that's not enough for her internally because she's got huge emotional deficits. So what this means is, and I was actually chatting about this with my colleague Mike, who was revealing this about his own past as a fearful avoidant, is you could be the most amazing partner, but if your fearful avoidant partner doesn't feel good enough internally, not just in terms of self-esteem, I mean just internally happy, they're not going to be satisfied in a secure relationship because they're starving, for proper attunement and a whole host of other things. You will never be able to pour into a hole in their bucket because, well, you can, but it's going to constantly leak because they haven't learned to patch that up and also to build up their own reservoir of self-love and attunement. And self-love, I know, is a bit of a maudlin term, but really what we're saying in more clinical terms is being able to heal a lot of those parts of ourselves that have felt neglected and hurt from childhood, and also finding, inner resources for satisfaction and acceptance, amongst other things as well, too. And also giving ourselves time and attention to actually address our own stuff, savory and unsavory. The other thing I was also going to say, I love the point you made about the going cold turkey with the antidepressants. I am not someone who's able to prescribe my clients any form of medication, but even that seemed a bit intense for me because a lot of my clients who eventually come off, whether it be anti-anxiety, anti-depression medication, do so quite slowly. So it makes me think that that was quite an impulsive move there. And one thing that I don't believe you mentioned, Megan, that I want to talk about is very true to gay dating, and that is internalized homophobia. I don't sense it already, but one thing I will say is I get worried when I hear people who've just recently come out of the closet and are feeling more acceptance for who they are, because I don't know if this showed up in Lucy's relationship, but I find that people who are slow to accept their sexuality, not shine bright like a diamond, or to, and I'm using this word not pejoratively, but just to describe how it's very superficial. When people have what I call like a peacocking self-esteem, where they feel the need to show, their colors, so to speak, and this can be anyone, it doesn't have to be anyone in the LGBT community, they're doing something in a way to obviously elicit a reaction in someone. It may not necessarily be an authentic reflection of self. So if you've got someone who's on either end of the spectrum, who's deeply repressed or showing these big, loud, vibrant, a vibrant presentation, it doesn't mean they've actually achieved a sense of self-satisfaction and acceptance of oneself. Now, how does that relate to what's going on here? The problem is that if you're finding it difficult to psychologically accept yourself and also part of the community, it's like dating a misogynist. And like, for example, or dating someone with like heavy misandry. In a straight relationship, if you are a woman dating a guy who hates women, you're fucked because that fear and unprocessed hatred, typically because the man's had a troubling relationship with his mum, is going to come between you and them. In a gay relationship, if a person doesn't have the resources to work through some of that internalized homophobia, it will get in the way of being able to feel comfortable in an LGBTQI plus relationship. So that's a really important point I just want to throw out there.
Yes, Ken, and also I love everything you said as well. And really also finishing talking about um, if you are still experiencing some internalized homophobia, it's not going to make this relationship um, healthy and stable and fulfilling. It's not. Um, and I think for folks that are maybe not part of the LGBTQ community, um, it's when that full acceptance is there, you have to have vulnerability with yourself and acceptance with yourself, to really be able to be okay and comfortable with who you are and to have successful relationships. And when I think about avoidance and vulnerability, those things also don't go hand in hand, and it can also feel like a mark of shame. And I think, Ken, you phrased it as one time in a recording of, oh, you know something else that's wrong with me, or something along that line, when you were talking about a different letter reading where somebody was struggling with some internalized homophobia. And just dating, if Jess maybe identifies as a lesbian or bisexual, but having sexual interest in dating other women, just dating them isn't enough to break down internalized homophobia. Like, that shit you gotta work through in therapy. So even though she might be in a relationship with another woman, does not mean internalized homophobia is not present. So I also wanted to just flag that with folks who are maybe not part of the community and are like, what is that? How does that work? I don't get it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I love what you just said there. And I want to just take another moment to say yes, because we don't even know if Jess identifies as a lesbian or someone who's bisexual. Hell, she could still be claiming that she's straight in the future as well, too, And the
Yeah.
reason I'm sharing this is because many people who have an uncertainty of their sexuality, like they're in that questioning category, I want to make it very clear. If you're questioning because you're trying to figure it out, that's one thing. But when there's shame around it, when there's a feeling of like, I can't accept myself for who I am, and you haven't got a definitive idea of like, this is what my preferences are in terms of sexuality, this is what I know to be true. The problem is that it's very easy, particularly for those that are severely avoidantly attached, to exit a relationship like this and then bounce back into a seemingly straight relationship where that intimacy isn't present. And I've seen many, many people be badly, badly traumatized and burned by a partner who's seemingly gone back to being quote unquote straight when it's clear they're not, to get back into the closet because the closet is more socially acceptable and the shame is too difficult to deal with.
Yep. And I've also seen, whether it's, kind of get out engaging in, things with the LGBTQ community, or, dating, or just out and seeing people. Um, I have noticed that there, again, not everybody, I want to make this clear, but if someone, again, is really struggling with their own internalized homophobia, can, as you were talking about, sometimes it can be like this big show, and they're really like out there and really flamboyant. So if they are, really trying to push, certain stereotypes or certain roles, again, not everybody, but I can also see that as there is some internalized shame or concern going on, and you're trying to take on a role, whether that's someone that's maybe super, super butch or super, super femme, or trying to be, like a different kind of subcategory, but really push in and play into those roles, those expectations, or some stereotypes, to try and hide and mask from that. Or I've also worked with people um, who share that they're trying to be so open and flamboyant and push certain stereotypes because they are just struggling to be okay with who they are. And maybe if they really play it up, it will be okay. Again, not everybody, I really want to make that clear, but I've seen that. So yeah, it's sad. It really is.
Yep, I completely agree with everything that Megan was saying. But I think circling back to this letter, because I think this is really interesting. Jess is left in a flood of tears, insisting she didn't need Lucy's support. After 2 weeks, anxiety made her ring Lucy. They talked for 2 hours. Jess said she needed to stop denying her issues and had taken sick leave, gotten back into therapy, and started another round of antidepressants. She couldn't recall the good times in our relationship, but was tearful talking to me. Compartmentalization. 4 weeks following this phone conversation and no contact, I bumped into her unexpectedly, but briefly at work. Later, my friend told me she saw Jess crying in the work bathroom. That night, Jess sent me a WhatsApp. She was sorry for startling me and hoped I was well. I responded and inquired about her health. Jess said she was much better. I removed Jess from my socials in mid-May, and I'd given up hope that she would come round. Can I just say there, good on you. Seriously, Lucy, smart
Mhm.
move for you. Oh, but oh dear. Then the WhatsApp message came. Apparently, Jess had written, I miss you so much. I think about you constantly. Can we meet? That's real fear of abandonment talking. She's very fearful, avoidant. She regretted ending things. Jess said she had improved over the 10 weeks apart. Crazily, she assumed I would move on rapidly and hook up with my friend who I had never expressed interest in. I explained the hurt she'd caused and how we should prevent this. She would take her meds, she admitted, and also accepted that she had challenges. Aye, we guessed it. She had challenges accepting her sexuality. But now she was proud. No, she fucking isn't. I can tell you now that is not resolved. No one gets over that shit that quickly. Just said when she saw me at work, and I was quote unquote. Actually, can I just take a pause there? So the reason why I had that reaction and said that is not the issue is I bet you anything she went to her therapist and her therapist would have been like, okay, so what's going on? And one of the issues might have been maybe you actually have shame of being a lesbian in this relationship. And I bet she might have been like, yeah, maybe that's the issue. That's not the issue. Yes, it's definitely probably part of it, but that's not the real reason why this is happening in this relationship. I bet if the therapist isn't aware, this is no discredit to the therapist, they may have done a great job, but I bet if I'm assuming correctly, um, what's actually going on here is that Jess is having a fear of abandonment moment and she's reaching out to Lucy to try and get back with her because she really misses her. And I think she's blaming it on her lack of acceptance of her sexuality, but that's not the issue.
I was going to say absolutely not. And when she's crying in the bathroom, she's very tearful. There's so many emotions coming up, and you said right, she's compartmentalizing so much. So crying in the bathroom, she's like, "Oh, I must have startled you. I'm so sorry, Jess." Or no, so I'm so sorry, Lucy. She goes, "Oh yeah, now I'm so much better. Let me just take all of my big emotions and put them in the file cabinet and just compartmentalize them and shove them back." It's it's like, yeah, it's if I tell myself I'm fine, if I tell myself I'm so proud to be out with my sexuality, really, I'm fine. I'm so proud. There's no depth, there's no looking any further into it. It's just surface level, because really having to go deep and figure out what the fuck is going on, like for Jess, that's too much for her. And also Glenn, sorry, I tried to say two words at once. Ken, I love how you took off the glasses and this was like, this is official. This was, we were getting serious. Those glasses came off and you were like, ah. So
I will admit, like I always have a
oh man.
I always have smug satisfaction when I realize this. Because I mean, look, not that not that I believe that I have any avoidant attachment stuff, but I've seen the patterns time and time again. Like, I mean, and I know what it's like to work with internalized homophobia. Like, for me, when I was hearing some of this, my brain went, yeah, something tells me this might become an issue later down the line as well, too. It's just one of those things, for those of you listening, it's one of those things where I can sense the symptom, usually a mile away because I can see where it's potentially leading. And so when it showed up here, my brain was like, hooray, like, I was right. And it's actually a good feeling because in this world of ours where we're inundated with like what a red flag is and how it shows up, I've become very easy for me to spot things like addiction, attachment issues, internalized discrimination and misogyny, misandry, homophobia, whatever it may be. And these are the big things which you can't fix in a relationship. Like they're the things where it's like that person needs a lot of therapy and you're not going to get, you're not going to get in between that if they haven't fixed it. So if I hear language of that or sense it, I'll pick it up quite quickly and be like, yeah, that's probably going to come up and be a barrier. But other than that, though, that's just the way my brain operates. I get a little bit of joy out of being like, yep, I spotted it.
Oh my gosh. I'm chuckling over here. Yeah, it's satisfactory and it's not right, it's not satisfaction of somebody's pain. It's not. Like
No.
I would never want to be um Jess ever. But being able to also pick up and go, this is what's going on. And also I know a lot of people talk about like attachments, pop psychology, and there's so many holes and it's not a great theory. Then tell me why there's so many similarities and there's so many patterns going on. And we are understanding that there's brain chemistry that happens, and people that have experienced a lot of trauma will have attachment issues. So again, right? Like you and I use the example of it's like ice cream. When you make ice cream, it's eggs, it's sugar, it's cream, and then the flavorings and the add-ins, you customize them and you can do whatever you want. All of these relationships are like the ice cream base, and the flavorings and the add-ins are the unique, kind of pieces for each relationship, but it's all ice cream at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, right, so you can smell it a mile away, and I can do that too now. As it's like a maybe like a weird party trick. I can smell avoidant attachment. Like I can pick it up.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like once you figure out the signs and you know what's going on with somebody, you can say, "Hey, nice meeting you, but not for me. I would rather not be traumatized again."
Yes to everything you said. And here's the thing why, I don't mind having these little moments of, pointing this out is because it's my hope that those of you listening to this, and Lucy, you're the one who's obviously written this in, and I don't want to obviously, dethrone your moment to talk about your relationship, but it's just to say, I hope you pay attention to this because this stuff is everywhere. And it's really my opportunity to try and provide this education for people to be like, if I can spot it, you need to be able to spot this as well too. Hopefully you won't need a lot of this stuff anymore. But schools aren't providing this information. Even in formal mental health training, we don't learn this. It's stuff you listen, you learn. I have got to be honest, I have learned more from these letter readings than I ever have reading books like Attached. Don't get me wrong, they're great books, but this stuff, it shows the patterns over and over and over again. And if you see it, it's easy to be like, I can spot this now from a mile away. And so just wanted to make that little TED Talk moment to talk about that too. Let's get back to Lucy's letter though. So Jess said that when she saw me at work and I was quote unquote cold, she realized she might have lost me forever, feeling rejected when she tried to stalk my socials and realized I'd unfollowed her. She discussed with parents and friends about how she could get me back. We concluded Jess had avoidant traits. Just avoidant traits? It's like, honey, fearful avoidant 101. Lucy says, I am anxiously attached, so we negotiated how we would navigate this. Jess reverted back to the sweet, attentive girlfriend I knew. In fact, she behaved more on the anxious side. By mid-July 2024, we got back into a blissful relationship. She was supportive during some personal issues I had. Now, our physical intimacy dwindled in mid-August due to her body image issues and my burnout. I wasn't worried because we were still affectionate and discussed why openly. I was confident it would return. In early September 2024, I told Jess I loved her for the first time. She seemed anxious, saying she didn't know what romantic love felt like. Later, Jess said that she had Googled, how do you know if when you love someone? And had later told her friends she thought she was falling in love. I reassured Jess that she didn't need to reciprocate until she was ready. But being able to say this eventually in a relationship was important to me. I figured what she had said to her friend was promising and hoped that she needed more time as it was still early on. I was buoyed by the fact that she wanted me to meet her whole family. Jess was unfortunately diagnosed with a chronic but treatable physical illness that week and had reduced her antidepressant dose again. She said she felt lost because her mental health was improving and she now had more headspace to think about what she wanted, but this freedom scared her. I didn't know what this meant exactly. I asked about specific concerns. She could only reply, I don't know, and say things like, I'm lucky to have you, and thank you for being you, but never reciprocate that she loves me. Until just before then, we had excitedly discussed the hypothetical future, such as moving in together one day and visiting my family in my native UK in 2025. Let's take a pause here. Um, Megan, what are your thoughts on this thus far?
I know you were saying so in the earlier in the letter you said, I think we determined Jess has avoidant attachment, and you're like, yeah, and fearful avoidant, and I'm also going to add some serious relationship OCD. I think, where was it here? Um, I think a big one that really struck me um, was, and I guess this isn't specific to relationship OCD, but just saying she doesn't know if she's ever fallen in love with anybody. That's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. It really is. When I hear people say, I don't know what it's like to love somebody, um, you're missing out. And it's so sad. And it doesn't have to be a romantic partner. It can be family, it can be friends. Um, you know, being able to love is a gift. And folks that can't do that, again, that's a result of serious trauma, things that have happened, not being able to trust people. There's been a lot of betrayal in their life. Again, that's something I would not wish on anybody. So that was quite sad. But where the relationship OCD kicked in was, you know, uh, um, saying things like, I don't know what this meant exactly, asking about specific concerns. She would just say, I don't know. I'm lucky to have you, or thank you for being you. But she couldn't really reciprocate that love. Well, okay, maybe not that specifically relationship OCD, but what I hear is that there's a fear of vulnerability, a real fear of saying or admitting that there might be love or big feelings showing up. She says, I'm lucky to have you. Thank you for being you, but no ability to get deep and vulnerable and really go into thoughts and feelings of emotions that um, Jess is having for Lucy. So that's a big avoidant trait coming up. Um, but again, just you said just before all that happened, excitingly discussing a hypothetical future, moving in together one day and visiting her family in the UK, the travel and solidifying the relationship, and folks that are really severe in their avoidant attachment, um, as they, as kind of big steps happen, like we're going to move in together, we're going to get married, we're going to put a label on things that can really almost solidify for them that this relationship is real. I have to show up for another person. There's going to be expectations. Or, what if they leave me? What if something happens and they betray me? So oftentimes those next steps can activate avoidant behavior. So I wonder, she was saying just before Jess was saying, oh, I'm lucky to have you, or I don't know what's going on emotionally and thought wise. You were talking about moving in together and going to the UK. Also, I apologize if I'm bouncing back here, but Lucy, I wanted to highlight that you shared you were feeling really, really burnt out, and I'm understanding it as in the context of I'm burnt out in this relationship. If we really feel that way, that can be like a yellow or a red flag that clearly we can understand something's not working, but maybe that red flag can be maybe this won't work if the other person isn't really doing their part or can't get to the same level that you are. And also working in mental health and addictions, I know that we can really feel like we push ourselves to the point of burnout, or we do overextend ourselves to help other people. And we can do that to our own detriment. That's something I think that a lot of folks do in this line of work because we care and we're passionate about others, and we have limited resources and finances to help, like, kind of with government and the system. And we tend to just keep giving and giving and pushing, and we get burnt out. And yes, that's professional, but that can also spill into our personal lives with our relationships too. So that's something to, I think, really look at for yourself. Is burnout in the relationship, but where's burnout in other areas of your life too? Because if that's not managed, it's going to be really, really hard to have a successful and fulfilling relationship that's meaningful for you. I want to highlight that as well for you, Lucy. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say for this part of the letter.
Yep. Yep. I love everything you said. And I also want to say too, it seems to me that the issue hasn't been resolved, that, you know, Jess has come back to this relationship with a lot of gusto, but it sounds like she's still got those classic ROCD concerns about, like, I don't know if I've ever felt romantic love before. And it doesn't sound to me like it's a case of, this being I don't feel like she's questioning this from the place of like, oh my God, like I've never felt this way before. This is so nice. Like she's already admitted way back earlier that she never felt this emotional connection before. Now it seems to be more in the realm of doubt. It seems to be more in the realm of rumination and obsessive compulsive sort of thinking, being like, what's this supposed to feel like? I'm not sure if I'm feeling this way. She's still holding out on saying, I love you from what I understand as well too. Like she doesn't seem to be able to express it when she earlier was expressing how much, the connection, really bonded with her. It just sounds like she's very disconnected. So that's not promising given the circumstances, and she's obviously got a lot to work through. Anyways, oh, well, if we continue, I guess this nicely leads into what I wanted to say. Sorry, it nicely leads from what I was saying because Lucy writes, over September, Jess began to say she didn't know what she wanted. Well, there you go, classic ROCD. She started shutting me down when I mentioned plans, saying we are still dating and getting to know each other. She would trail off when I asked for clarity, saying she didn't want to hurt me and couldn't express herself clearly. That is, okay, again, classic ROCD. That's when the inner critic is saying to them, you're going to hurt them if you continue being with them. I said I was anxious about sustaining a relationship long term with this behavior. Just became worried that I would leave. I said no. I was trying to strengthen the relationship. Now, at the end of September, I met the family as planned, and this involved a long weekend away where Jess's younger sister announced her first pregnancy. Jess cried with happiness with her family, but was distant with me.
Mm.
Bed that night at her parents' house, I brought the distance up. Jess said she wished she saw more of her family, and I felt I was coming across immature, so I apologized and dropped it. No, actually, I think that was a very fair thing to say. Again,
Yeah.
Jess said she had doubts. I was upset about this repeating theme and asked her why she'd brought me to meet her family then, to which she said it was important to her that I met them. We still had a nice weekend, and on the way home, Jess was tearful. She was having dark thoughts but couldn't clarify. Her parents had quote unquote loved me and said, it's so nice to see you being loved. Jess again expressed anxiety about her future, but it seemed more about general life rather than about our relationship. Early October, I was worried as Jess had made no plans during her annual leave. We didn't spend much time together, and when back at work, Jess was distant and messaging me less. She said she felt disconnected, that she felt pressured by me to reciprocate that she loved me. She wanted to lighten things up and said I shouldn't come to a family event she'd invited me to 2 weeks later. I was confused, as we'd only been back together for almost 4 months. Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't mean to interrupt, but that paragraph also speaks to all of the relationship OCD pieces coming up because you were able to articulate it better than I was earlier in this letter. There's so much ROCD going on, and this paragraph talks about early October leave and then the disconnection. Those are also symptoms of relationship OCD. So yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think just to take a moment here to say that, you know, what we see with people who have a disorganized, fearful avoidant attachment style, particularly when they're very dismissive leaning, are these huge internal conflicts that oscillate between wanting closeness and connection and also wanting to push the other person away. And it's not the same experience as that of someone who's anxiously attached or a dismissive avoidant. A fearful avoidant who is missing the partner is reaching out because they're scared to have loss in their life. They're scared to have someone, it's not just leave them, it's dealing with the feelings of someone walking out on their life and actually having like an ending to something. And they'll do anything in their power to avoid that and to still be with that person. And it can be quite I'm going to try and frame this as accurately as I can. It can feel very selfish to the receiving person because it's actually not about them, the partner, being treated, you know, with respect, meaning that avoidant attacher, because they're running on empty, they will do whatever it takes when they're feeling that fear of abandonment to reach out because they need to feel like they're still able to connect and get those emotional needs met by any means necessary. And it may seem like they're being empathetic, to which degree they can be, but a lot of this is because they're just yearning to get that, that validation and hit for them to feel good. I probably have said this in a bit of a pejorative way, and I don't want to make it seem like they're doing this to use people. But when you're running on empty, especially if you're like in starvation mode in real life, you will just go out of your way to smash anything to get your fill and to fill you up in, to avoid, to overcome the hunger that you're going through. And it's the same for people who have big emotional deficits and and childhood neglect. They will do whatever it takes to get their emotional needs met. So in a way, it's like dealing with emotional beggars who are just desperate to try and get that hit. And then once they've got that, the danger is then for a lot of these individuals is that they then have quite a frightened reaction when they're getting closer to someone, because closeness brings up all this anxiety in them about whether this is the right relationship. I just don't know if I'm meant to be in a relationship. Maybe I don't even like my partner. And so they tend to vomit up all of which they've just consumed. So it's quite a vile experience for them to go through as much as it is to be on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, Ken, I love how you explained that. You did it so well, and it's so true. And I can imagine folks that do experience relationship OCD that are working on it or are aware of how this shows up for them would probably confirm also how you spoke about it.
Yeah. I want to just quickly say before we go back into this, I know I kind of made that sound a bit pejorative because it's not always the case that fearful avoidance will do this, but it's just to say that when you have had a lot of childhood neglect, you can behave in very abusive ways to people too, regardless of your attachment style. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why on one hand, it's a fine line between being compassionate with boundaries, but also needing to firmly encourage people, you got to work on this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's with that fine line, we can say, I can understand what's going on. I can understand how this behavior came to be, but that doesn't mean it's okay. And if accepting it is causing us hurt and harm, then that's when we can say no, absolutely. So yeah.
Yep,
All right.
completely agree. So,
Yeah.
let's see. We've read all of that. Early October, I was worried as Jess had made no plans during her annual leave. I remember we messaged this and she was saying she feels disconnected, pressured by me to reciprocate that she loved me. And she said she wanted to lighten things up and said I should come to a family event she had invited me to 2 weeks later. Now, I was confused because we'd been back together for almost 4 months. She even requested a week without any contact for space, and I protested, so we took a weekend. Fair enough. After this, we decided her avoidance was flaring again, and my anxiety was also triggering it too. We said we'd spend more light-hearted time together to regulate. That week, we chatted like best friends as usual, but physical affection was noticeably absent. Jess was rejecting my bids for any physical affection with excuses. In mid-October, we did a 20-kilometer walk, and that night she reluctantly came out for dinner. After dinner, I asked Jess about the approaching family weekend, and she became noticeably anxious. In her car on the lift back to my home, Jess suddenly broke down and said the relationship was not working. She'd gotten to know me better and decided we weren't compatible. She couldn't say why. I was, in her words, amazing and had done nothing wrong. I was the best thing that had ever happened to her, she said, the only person that had ever accepted her. And she also added, you cared for me and wouldn't be happy, and I wouldn't be happier without you. I asked for closure, so she invited me to hers the next day, warning she would likely not be able to answer my questions. I admit I was emotional and did beg to try to fix things. We both cried, and she said she had lost romantic feelings for me and saw me as objectively attractive, but was no longer attracted to me and saw me only as a friend. She couldn't give me the reassurance I asked for and was quote unquote tired of fighting all the time and no longer wanted to work at things. She didn't know when her feelings changed. I asked if this was a self-sabotaging pattern and whether she was afraid of commitment. She replied, maybe, maybe I'm broken. She seemed as devastated as me. Okay, let's take a pause here. Megan, what are your thoughts on this bombshell that's happened to poor Lucy?
Oh my gosh. Oh, for Lucy, my heart has broken a million pieces for you reading this. I can relate to a very similar situation. So I know what this feels like. And it goes back to, I promise it had nothing to do with you, nothing to do what you brought to the table, what you did or didn't do. And even Lucy or Jess said, "You are amazing. You didn't do anything wrong. I can't answer your questions," and how she started to really disconnect and pull away as the upcoming family event, as that this family event was coming in the future, and how she was rejecting your bids for connection and really pushing you away. Um, that is very, very avoidant behavior. And also, I see more relationship OCD behaviors coming up. Her brain feels so threatened by you. Again, you didn't do anything wrong, but the threat is wanting connection um, and the kindness and compassion and vulnerability that can be showing up, and that scares the shit out of her. That was met with, betrayal and heartache and pain, and or may have been absent for her growing up. So she doesn't know what to do with love and kindness and affection, and it scares her. So she is pushing you away because of big feelings coming up, and because the intensity and some of the expectations. And again, that relationship OCD is kicking in, going, you know what? Yeah, Lucy just isn't the person for you, and not being able to explain why. Or again, Jess was saying that she won't be able to answer those questions. There's either a fear of how you would respond, not saying you would respond in an abusive or hurtful way, but that's what her brain is telling her probably will happen. Um,
Yep.
or it could also be some surface level of like, I don't really know why. Could be a bit of both, but often it's more of, I don't know. Like Lucy is going to be hurtful and abusive and just miserable, so we can't tell her. Or she's going to try and pull you back into this relationship, and that's not what we want, so we can't tell her what's going on. This is just pushing away relationship OCD, kicking in hard, really kicking in hard in this relationship. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that what's just so sad about this is you mentioned how apparently your anxious behavior was triggering her avoidance. That's possibly true, but I just think this outcome was inevitable. Like, I mean, it within this letter alone, there doesn't seem to be any indicator that you've done anything egregiously anxiously attached, meaning that it doesn't sound like you've been texting her consistently to the point of being, over the top. It doesn't sound like you've been asking for much when she asked for space. And you're like, can I at least see you once a week on the weekend when she tried to take a week off? Like, that's a bit excessive of her, if you ask me. I'm not saying you don't have work to do, Lucy, but it just doesn't seem to me like you were reacting in such a way that was unreasonable given the circumstances. If anything, I'm actually proud of how you have spoken up and constantly reacted, because a lot of anxious attachers may not, speak up for themselves at all. They may just try and play it cool, or they take it up a notch and become quite argumentative as well too. That's normally what we'd see when things start to get to what I call like the loud anxious attacher behavior, where it's like very, they get into their fight energy and start being quite aggressive, very combative, etc. But I think the thing that really just, is sad here is the fact that you're trying to make it work, and it just seems like Jess is just, really listening way too hard to a lot of the, the internal conflict that's telling her that she's just not gonna be happy with you. And I wouldn't be surprised if she's shutting down. That'll explain why she's lost her attraction to you. And it's temporary. But of course, you wouldn't know that. Like, it's pretty awful to have a partner say, I've lost attraction for you, especially when they were so keen on getting back to you, because it can make you feel like you've done something wrong to cause this, which you haven't. It's just, that's just how ROCD works. It's like when you're a fearful avoidant and you feel this way, you really get close to someone, and the closer you get, you can be filled up with a lot of disgust to push away the person, because you have big fears of not being good enough, and you flaw find and you look for every excuse in the book to get away.
Yeah. Yeah, Ken, you said that so well. So right, that all goes back to, it's not really, really, Lucy, it's not you, it's her. That's what's going on. So yeah.
Yep. So let's continue, and hopefully it doesn't get much worse for you, but I'm not going to hold my breath because I know it can be brutal to go through this experience. I'm so sorry that you're going through this, Jess. I will say I do feel sorry for, you know, for Jess to a degree. Like I think Lucy, you're obviously the one who's probably hurting the most as a consequence, but I could see where Jess would be struggling too in her own way as well. You're the person who wrote the letter, so I'm on your side for for pretty much 99% of this. In any case, Lucy continues. Um, I asked whether she would delete my number, and she said yes, she would delete everything and unfollow. She said, relationships just end. I'll miss you, but it's not a reason to get back together. She denied being depressed. And she was low because she was planning to end things. She was so anxious I would hate her and that I would tell my, oh, she was so anxious that I would hate her and that I would go on to tell my friends that she was the villain. So that's definitely speaking to the shame wound that she has about being a bad person. So she doesn't want to feel like she's the villain. She said it was important to her I met her family, despite admitting planning to break up before planning to break up before this. She hadn't discussed these feelings with anyone, not even her therapist, who she saw fortnightly. I asked if there was someone else, and she cried, I just want to be alone. I believe her when she says that in the moment, but she'll probably look for someone else immediately after. She hugged me tightly and she wouldn't let me go, and then I left, both in floods of tears. I didn't delete her number and sent her one final goodbye message, inviting her to talk again if she needed it. It's now 3 months without contact, and I can still see Jess's WhatsApp status, so she hasn't deleted my contact. She works occasionally with a close friend of mine who's called Rachel. Jess doesn't know Rachel well. Last week, Jess broke down and offloaded to Rachel at work, revealing she missed me but cannot risk hurting me again. Yeah, there we go. That's what I was saying. Those feelings come back. Jess told Rachel her entire mental health struggles, including intimate details. She said she's in the thick of it again. Apparently, Jess looks sad and gaunt. This baffles me, as only two of Jess's friends, her immediate family, and me knew the details. She's a very private person, and Jess told Rachel her mental health condition had relapsed towards the end of our relationship. She's performing well, but still at work. Jess said also that she knew she had that I had strong feelings for her, but she was quote unquote not quite there, and she hated herself for hurting me. Rachel encouraged Jess to talk to me, but Jess asked her not to tell me what she'd revealed. Of course, Rachel passed this on. Jess told Rachel she doesn't want to confuse me, as she still doesn't know what she wants out of life, and closure comes from within. Jess added that she'd be happy to have a conversation with me, but asked Rachel not to tell me this. She said she was so anxious about seeing me at work. Jess asked Rachel how I was doing, who replied, not great, to which Jess started crying again. I'm sure Jess spoke to Rachel, hoping it would get back to me, and I'm convinced she felt some kind of love for me. I agree. Is this fearful avoidant attachment with a complicated mental health overlay, or is it really a case of she's just not that into you, or am I crazy? Megan, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Oh my. Um, so Jess, you hit the nail on the head. This absolutely is some pretty significant fearful avoidant attachment woundings coming up with a complicated mental health overlay. Absolutely. So um not there's not a little bit of like she said, or not that into it, or am I crazy? No, Lucy was into you. Significant attachment, fearful avoidant attachment woundings, complicated mental health overlay, and I promise you are the farthest thing from being crazy. Not You are not at all, not crazy a bit. She really did have, there was love and care for you there. And again, it goes back to people who say if they wanted to they would. It really is, if she could she would. There is so much trauma and pain and mental health that's not being managed, that's getting in the way. um and um this kind of part, and I'm gonna kind of call a little bit of like a little bit of bullshit from Jess, where in the letter Rachel said, something along the lines of, do you love her? And she said, oh yeah, but like not, I don't really love her like Jess loved me. And I'm like, no, I think you did. You can't admit it because that's being vulnerable, that's being honest and open. And again, if you're attachment woundings are so severe in that way. Love is vulnerable, and that was met with pain. So for you not really sharing how you're feeling is a way to avoid pain. And you're living in a lie. You're living in a lie. You're hurting yourself. You're hurting other people. Even if it's protective, I can appreciate it's protective, but at the end of the day, it destroys people. So yeah, and she said she hated herself for hurting her. This Jess is living in so much pain that I wouldn't wish on anybody. And that suffering is a choice. I'm gonna phrase it as that. Not like in a, I'm not saying that in a condescending or like it's just easy, go get help. But what I mean is that if there is some level of awareness that she is suffering, you can get help for it. And it's not easy or comfortable work to do. So that can be a limiting factor, or people can just will feel like I can't get better. And another thing too is, again, me working in this field, I have again, I have with the whites of my eyes seen other people like Jess in this line of work. And I don't mean to sound like a jerk saying this, but I take a step back and I go, you are, this is so destructive for you. Why are you working in this line of work, in this field, if you are not working on resolving your own traumas? Why are you hurting other people and you have some level of awareness that something is going on and you are not getting that fixed? That is hypocritical. It's abusive, and you are not leading by example. So not saying that from a holier than thou place, I have seen people behave that way. They can, and again, you can separate that when you're at work with your clients, with your colleagues. But the fact that it still shows up in other ways, yes, outside of work, you are not leading by example. So I hope Lucy gets her shit together and gets help. I do.
I think you mean Jess.
Jess, yes, I'm sorry, Lucy, not you, Jess. I hope Jess gets her shit together and gets help.
Yep. I,
So,
I I love everything you said, and I want to add to what you said too with regards to Jess. I think she's probably closer to that stage than a lot of other fearful avoidance and even dismissives we've talked about based on this letter alone. Because one thing that she's showing, which many avoidant attachers will not reveal to a lot of people, is how much shame and guilt she's feeling. The fact that she's having these big, from the sounds of it, dirty sobs about her actions. I got to be honest, it's rare for me to say this in these letters because often I'm very much on the side of the writer. And Lucy, you deserve all the support you get off the back of this because you did not deserve this. But I got to tell
mm-hmm.
you, I actually do feel a bit sorry for Jess as well too, because it sounds like she's in a world of shame over her actions. The next part's going to sound a bit firm. Good, because she needs to feel this. She needs to feel what it's like to do this to someone and actually do something about it, because if she doesn't address the shame and the guilt of what she's done, this is going to, continue. And also the danger is she could also be set up where she dates someone who's mega avoidant and does that to her. And she's then very at high risk of all kinds of mental health issues as well, too. She really, like, this is a great opportunity for her to, just sit with the fact that what she's done is not okay. I think one of the best things that a lot of avoidant attachers can see, if they're ever able to witness it, because I had this happen to me once, is the emotional carnage that's actually been caused by their actions. Because if they can sense that, I think it actually allows them to realize just what they've done to someone. It's hard for them to witness that because it obviously triggers every, bone in their body and it doesn't feel good. But maybe they do need to sit in that shame for a bit to realize the full extent of what they've committed.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I cannot say that any better than you did. And I also want to add to, again, someone who, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, works in mental health and addictions. I will bet you my paycheck, and I will own this if I also sound like an asshole. She, Jess, went into this field to try and feel better about herself. I've also seen a lot of folks come into spaces of social services, work with vulnerable people, or when we are struggling, to try and avoid their own toxic, nasty behaviors and try to say, I'm not a bad person. Look at me. I help people that are struggling, so that they don't have to look and see that they are a problem in areas of their life, for example, in relationships. So that also, oh, it bothers me so much when I, if when I see that. So um I do think that Jess is doing this to just avoid having to look at herself. And again, she has some level of awareness, and we talk about a mental health. You are not inherently a villain. You are not this bad, awful monster. That's trauma. That's upbringing. That's stuff that happened to you where that shame, these stories are internalized. So if she's saying this, but recognizes that that is a negative core belief, she knows she's got to do something about it, and she's choosing not to. So again, that goes back to, I would not be surprised if she's in this line of work to just avoid her own pain. And it's gross and it bothers me as someone who also works in mental health and addiction space.
Yep.
She has to get her shit together. So yeah,
Yep.
that's what I got to say to that.
The last thing I'll say too is it's dangerous for people to be in any form of healthcare if they also have these attachment wounds because, if they get close to people in healthcare, like their clients, they can still enact the avoidant discard on their clients as well too. Like that does happen, if,
Mm-hmm.
they
It
can,
does.
and many fearful avoidants in particular play out the caregiving role because that's what they've been sort of, you know, I guess fostered into because of enmeshment and they're being parentified. So what do they do in healthcare? Play out a lot of that trauma with their clients as well too. Not every fearful avoidant does this. This is those that are like
Yes.
really living out their trauma. And it's just one of those things where they can be hyper intelligent, they can be bloody smart, and they seem empathic because they've got a lot of awareness and a degrees of emotional awareness, but they may lack the necessary boundaries, wherewithal to be a good container for a lot of their clients. Like sometimes I'll see fearful avoidant influencers who will say things like, oh, you need to work on your mindset in order to overcome adversity. And it's like, that's because that's what you had to do to compartmentalize your pain. As Amy said today, because fearful avoidance often come from a lot of trauma, they are masters of compartmentalizing because that's how they've grown up and had to survive. Whereas for those of us who've never had to do that, there's no need to compartmentalize because we didn't face such adversity. It still might have been adverse, but it may not have been to that dimension. And so when you're listening to people, be very mindful that there are plenty of, well-intentioned people like Jess who are in healthcare and influencers and coaches who, frankly, are still playing out their trauma and they're trying to give you the same strategies, the same adaptation advice that they have applied to their own life, but it's not necessarily healthy, grounded advice built on genuine connection.
Yes. Ken, thank you for saying that in a much more eloquent way than I can. That was perfect. Thank you so much for highlighting that.
But yeah, other than that, though, I just want to round out here by saying, Lucy, I'm going to extend a bit of, grace to Jess as well, because look, to Jess's credit, she wasn't, yes, she did some absolutely atrocious things. And I'm glad to see that she's demonstrating degrees of self-awareness and, repentance for her own actions. But to you, Lucy, I am so sorry that you've gone through this. You did not deserve to go through this. I think you were very activated by her behavior. And I actually thought you behaved reasonably well based on what I'm reading from this letter. So I'm sorry that
Mm-hmm.
you've had this experience because you did not deserve to go through this.
Absolutely. I was gonna say, yeah, that, pain, there is sadness and also feeling bad for Jess, but Lucy, you handled it so gracefully, and I hope you never ever have to relive an experience like this again with anybody. You did nothing to deserve it. And as Ken said, considering the situation, you handled it quite well. So I do hope that this letter reading answered some questions and help with some validation and that you're taking care of yourself and you're healing off the back of this experience.
Yep. And you're definitely, I know you asked, am I crazy? Hell no. You probably felt crazy off the back of this, but you're not crazy. In any case, guys, thank you for listening. If you found it of help, that's amazing. Feel free to leave us a review. It really helps us to know that we're giving you what you need off the back of this. And if you want to submit a letter, we're actually going to reduce the letter submissions to 4 going forward for the next few months, just because I want to take my time to really just do them with my team members. If I do them like 3 times a week, it just gets a bit much for me and I can't really find the same enthusiasm for them. So I really want to allow myself to just work my way through them and really enjoy them with my team members. And that will be, the submissions will be open again at the end of the month, or at the very least early March as well too. In any case, thanks guys. And lastly, before we finish this recording up, is there anything you want to finish off saying, Megan, as well too?
Yeah, if folks are interested in working with me, I am taking clients. I am located, like again, I see people all over the world, but I'm located in a community about 2 hours away from Toronto, so I'm Eastern Standard Time. I work with Ken part-time as a coach, so it's Mondays and Tuesdays. And like I said, I do have capacity for clients. And again, if wherever you are in the world, if your time works with my time, I would love to work with you. And if folks have questions, you can email me, you can reach out. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you guys, and we'll see you guys very soon.